And welcome to Chiller Chat, a new year, a new season. I am your guest host, Luke Ruot, and joining me is the creator of not only Chiller Chat, but Chiller Night Theater, Bryan Hogue. Bryan!
Hey.
Congrats.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show tonight.
Welcome to your show.
Yes.
Bryan, of course, hosts Chiller Chat. Bryan, let's learn the history of Chiller Night Theater.
Okay. Well, the history of it is 10 years ago, in 2008, May of 2008, is when I first started the first version of the show, and we called it Sleepy Hollow Theater. And I just wanted to do a hosted horror show. So we did that for a while, and on the very second episode of Sleepy Hollow Theater was the very first Chiller Chat. So I've been doing this for quite a while. My inspiration for that show came from watching Chiller Theater every Saturday night with my family, with Chilly Billy Cardell. And so I just wanted to continue that tradition in this area, and started my own show, and here we are 10 years later.
Well, let's go back to when you were a kid. What was the first horror movie you remember watching where you just went, wow, I'm hooked?
It's gotta be one of the Universals, you know, whether it be Dracula or Frankenstein. I can't pinpoint it, but I know it was one of them because I've always had that deep fondness for the Universal monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Bride of Frankenstein.
The classics.
The classics, yes.
So what is it about horror movies that just grabs your attention and says, you know, I want to be a part of it somehow?
I think it was just the growing up having fun. There's a fun to fear. You know, as long as you know that fear is not real, there's a fun to that. Sitting around the campfire, telling the ghost stories in the dark. You know, watching the monster movie at night with the lights down low. And there's a thrill to that. My brothers and I would get scared every Saturday night watching these things, and we couldn't wait till Saturday came to watch it again. You know, it was just something to where, yeah, we were afraid, but we just loved it. It was so fun, just like Halloween. You know, the same thing. You know, it's scary, it's spooky, but there's just so much fun to it. And so that, I don't know, I just never grew out of that. Just like, you know, all the other things. I like a lot of the things that I liked as, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm still fascinated by that stuff. You know, superheroes and horror movies and science fiction. And so a big part of me just never grew up.
So you mentioned your hero and those Saturday nights out of Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So at what point did you say to yourself, wow, I think I could do something like that, but put my own spin on it?
I actually had the idea back in the mid-90s, and I was watching one of the shows, I think it was Chiller Theater One More Time. It was one of the specials that he did, Chilly Billy, Bill Cardell. And whichever one he had George Romero on as his guest, and he played Night of the Living Dead. And I remember watching that. I lived in Pittsburgh at the time, and I remember watching that thinking, oh, it'd be so neat to have this show continue. And at first it wasn't really the idea of me doing it. I just wanted that to continue. And then a little bit later after that, I thought, well, why couldn't I do that? You know, why couldn't I do that? And there's a lot of reasons why I can't do that. You know, it's not easy to do, but eventually I did come around and start doing it myself. So
now, for those who are familiar with Chiller Night Theater, the host, Jack Shadow, quite the character.
Yes.
How long have you had that concept in your mind?
That concept, it was born out of necessity. Back in 2006, I was doing a haunted house in the Cooperstown, Pennsylvania area, and we had this this host. It was going to be somebody who would just kind of give the crowd a little speech and then usher them into the haunted house. And I wanted a lot of emphasis on the gatekeeper, the greeter. And there was another actor who was supposed to play this part. Up until days before this was supposed to happen, they backed out. They said, no, the script's too long, I can't memorize this, and there's too much pressure, you know. So I thought, oh, wow. Here I was, the owner of this haunted house, and I didn't want to be an actor in it because I wanted
You were
to
running
manage.
it.
Yeah, it was a very hard thing to do. But there was a co-owner. I didn't do it on my own, but I thought, wow, I got to do this. I threw together a costume, and the skull mask was actually the last thing I picked up. I never knew what this character was going to look like, and so I played this character in my 2006 haunted house. 2007 haunted house came. I was still that character because it was just a lot of positive feedback. You know, people really enjoyed the character. I put a lot of theatrics into that character, and at that same time, 2007, I proposed an idea for the local TV station to do the hosted horror show, and they said, yeah, and I said, well, after I get done with this haunted house, I'd like to talk to you more about that. And then that's when it wasn't even going to be Jack Shadow as the host. It was going to be somebody else. And then they said, hey, would you consider Jack Shadow as the host? And I thought, oh, boy. You know, it was a weird thing for me because I thought, well, he was a creepy, spooky character. I mean, I didn't do the comedic angle with him. And so I didn't know how that was going to work, but it worked a lot easier than I had thought.
You just kind of touched upon it, but how has Jack changed from 10 years ago to now?
Well, one of the biggest changes is the mask, because at first it was a store-bought mask and glued onto my face, and then over time I sculpted and made my own mask. I went to school at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh for quite some time, and while I was down there, I learned how to do that. And so I always wanted it to be a custom-made mask for that part. So I thought, well, if I continue to do this show, I want my own look for the face, which I did.
So it almost has a Halloween type story where they take the William Shatner mask and kind of
Yeah.
change it a little bit.
Right.
You started out with the store-bought, but then over time you said, I want this to be my character. I want this to have the features that will make him unique.
I wanted that because I got more and more protective of the character, and I saw, you know, like that's mine, you know. And I thought, well, I don't want anyone to just be able to go out and buy that mask. And it turns out nobody could go out and buy that mask because they discontinued it after. But I had bought like a dozen of these things.
Oh, wow.
I knew I was going to do this character, you know, reoccurringly. So I went out and I bought like a dozen of them. And then after those had, served their purpose, you know, it was about time then to transition to the new one that I have.
So the mask changed. What about characteristics?
It was, it's a little strange because like in the haunted house, there's two different characters in a way, because in the haunted house, he was a more of a spooky, creepy character. And then over the years, because of the host part of Jack Shadow, I started maybe making a little bit more jokes and stuff like that with the guests coming through. So I'd have guests coming through saying, hey, what's the movie tomorrow night, Jack? You know, what do? You know, you got to kind of like play the host now. You can't just be creepy haunted house Jack. So I learned to kind of amalgamate, you know, those two characteristics into what he is now. So.
For those who watch the show, I think they would be surprised to learn how much research goes into the movies. Jack doesn't just present the movie and there's quick cuts back to him.
Right.
There's a lot of information that he provides during the course of the movie, which makes it a lot of fun, but means you spend a lot of time researching those movies.
Right. No, it's a lot of work. Bill Cardell did the same thing. He screened all those movies, made his notes, and kind of scripted this all. And I do the same because I like to be prepared with that type of thing. So I have to sit there, figure out what movie I'm going to watch. I have to divide it up into segments. I have to sit there and watch those segments and make very thorough notes, and you know, it is a process. You know, it's nothing that just gets slapped together. You know, I don't know. There's a lot of work to it.
Now, there's a lot of, shall we say, interesting movies. I don't want to say bad horror films, because I think you do a great job at finding the best in those, and I think Jack has fun with those.
Yeah.
But what's it like for you to do the research and find that movie that maybe somebody hasn't heard of, or maybe somebody hasn't watched in 40 years, to find that gem and to go through it?
Well, there are actually a lot that I've never seen, you know, and I'll be sitting there watching, like, that has a neat title to it, you know. I'll play that. That's got, you know, a vampire or wolf man or something like that, and I'll be sitting there like, and I'll be now I'm invested, because I've just spent like, you know, hours, and I'm sitting there like watching this movie thinking I gotta have fun with this, because this isn't the best horror movie I've seen. But the neat thing about doing a show like this, the Chiller Show, is the worse the movie is, the more fun you have with it, because the viewers, I think they know when they're tuning into a show like that yeah, you can get your good horror movies like the, you know, House on Haunted Hill and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and, you know, The Last Man on Earth. I love those movies. Those are good movies. But you're also going to get like Ega, the caveman movie that we did not too long ago, and you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space. And I think when the viewers see that we're playing something like that, or Robot Monster, they know it's going to be a fun episode, because you really have no choice. You can only take that and play the serious part of it. So you have to just make fun of it. In fact, when we played Plan 9 from Outer Space one time, I went the opposite route with it. I had Jack Shadow act like he thought that was a masterpiece. Like he lifted that, and nobody was allowed to criticize it, or they get thrown into the dungeon or tortured or whatever. So I have a lot of fun with those as well. So.
It has to be interesting. We've talked about this before, where you see the artwork for the movie, and it's beautiful. You know, I mean, there's some really good artists that took some of those movies and made them look really, really good.
Yes.
And I think that's what Jack does. He makes these movies. He makes it fun. He makes it I think he wants you to go along with him on that journey through that film.
Yeah.
And you're kind of seeing it through his eyes almost.
You know, the hosted horror show, it's an American tradition. It started here in this country back in like the mid 50s, maybe 54 or something like that. I don't know exactly, but the idea was to have, you know, they were playing these old movies on the TVs, and they were looking for things to play, and they would have a costumed narrator, okay, who would kind of give an intro and a conclusion, and maybe have fun with the movie along the way. That idea stemmed over into the comics at the time too, like the old EC comics, like Tales from the Crypt. Mm-hmm. You'd get the old, like the Crypt Keeper character who would do that, and so that's a very important part of that. You know, that host has to make that entertaining, the intro and the conclusion, and jump in a couple times throughout the movie and give some type of commentary, observation, you know, with a normally kind of a humorous spin to it, you know. So yeah, it's a neat thing with Jack Shadow because I couldn't do it like this. I mean, it was just like Bill Cardell. When he did it, he was himself. That was smart because he was a larger-than-life character in Pittsburgh. I couldn't do that because I'm not known, you know, like he was already an icon. I had to put on the face and everything, but that's why I think Jack Shadow works, you know.
Do you feel yourself transform when you put on that costume?
Yeah, when I first started playing that character in the haunted house, absolutely. In fact, I would have that face on, and I would see the reactions of the people when they came in. Now that part where I just said about the horror host, he gives that intro to the movie. Well, I was doing the same thing for the haunted house. So that character was a storyteller, and when I would do that and the guests would leave, I found myself wanting to stay in character. and it's a weird thing because, you know, here I am, a grown man dressed up, and you want to tell yourself, well, I don't want to take it too seriously. But in a way, you kind of are in a way because it's like you're up on a theater, you know, Chiller Night Theater. You know, you are on stage and you want to bring out the best in that character. So, I mean, I'd like to say, oh, I don't take it all that seriously. But in a way, I kind of do because I want a good quality show. And that I think that's the perfect host for that.
You mentioned the show started out known as Sleepy Hollow Theater, and then it's changed to Chiller Night Theater.
Yes.
Talk about that change.
The change was, well, when we did Sleepy Hollow Theater, the name was because we had this haunted attraction on Sleepy Hollow Drive, and we just thought it'd be kind of neat to make everything a Sleepy Hollow theme, you know, kind of made sense at the time. But then after a while, you know, I was no longer doing that particular haunted house, and kind of severed my ties with that Sleepy Hollow theme. And the more I looked at it, I thought, well, it doesn't make sense to call it that anymore because I'm not over there. And I got this idea that I wanted it to have Chiller in the name because I remember my childhood watching Chiller Theater, and I wanted to have that in the title somehow. Well, I actually talked to somebody and they said, you know, you can't really do that. You're going to get Chiller Theater fans that are going to kind of have a resentment. And there's a truth to that because I thought the same thing. You know, if somebody was on TV with a Chiller Theater, Chiller in the name, and they're doing a hosted horror show, I would be sitting there like, who do they think they are? They're not Bill Cardell, they're not Chilly Billy, you know? And I thought, I'm gonna do this, but I'm only gonna do it if I get Bill Cardell's blessing, his thumbs up. And that's exactly what I did. So what I did was I contacted Bill Cardell a couple years ago, and I met with him. I actually had him on the show as well. And I told him my idea. I showed him the logo that I had made up, you know, and talked about the name, which was a mix between Chiller Theater and Fright Night. I like that movie, Fright Night. So I thought, well, that is kind of neat, Chiller Night Theater. I talked to him about that and showed him the logo, and he really liked it. And he said, oh, yeah, you can do that. In fact, you could have called it Son of Chiller, you know? And I thought, wow, I mean, anybody who knows, like, that's a great compliment. That's a great honor, because that's saying that is directly stemming from that show, that parent show. And I said, wow, that was so nice of you to say that. I said, I got the logo and everything all ready for this. And so, no, he said, no, I like the name. It's a neat name.
Well, what was it like to meet your childhood idol?
It was surreal. It was very surreal. I had talked to him on the phone several times prior to actually meeting up with him at his house. And I'd be sitting there in the middle of this conversation thinking, oh my gosh, I'm talking to, this is Chilly Billy, you know? And I'd say, yes, sir, or Mr. Cardell, and he'd call me Chilly. So, you know, I just got used to calling him Chili. And I talked to him off and on for probably maybe about a year and a half before he passed away. But he was just such a nice guy. I mean, I was sitting there talking to him, much like I am with you now, sitting there thinking, I grew up watching you every Saturday night. I can't believe I'm here doing this. And so it was very surreal.
Did he give you any advice, anything to take with you to come back and add to the show?
He gave me advice for like the logo, you know, where that should go and stuff like that on the TV. Mostly production type of tips. But he really liked what we were doing, you know. I mean, with the interview and everything, it went really well. Very easy to talk to. I mean, he was just, I don't think I ever had a conversation with him under 40 minutes, you know.
Wow.
Like when he called. And, you know, the neat thing about him is when he called, it was always about me. Well, how are you doing? Well, how's your job going? You know, and he was always making it seem about me. And I'm thinking, I want to know about you. I finally got to meet you and I got you on the phone. You know, I'd like to know more about you. But he was just such a nice guy, genuine.
So over the years, you've gotten to meet a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So at some point you said, you know what, I think I could have a side show outside of Chiller Night Theater where we could actually sit down and talk to these folks. Mm-hmm. So Chiller Chat
Yes.
became its own show.
Yes. Well, I had the idea early on, when I first started Sleepy Hollow Theater. The very second episode, we had a ghost hunting group on there, and we interviewed them, and we went and accompanied them on one of their paranormal investigations, which was pretty cool. And at the time, I was listening a lot to this radio show called Coast to Coast with George Norway. I was listening to all this crazy paranormal and, you know, just bizarre topics every night. And Bigfoot, UFOs, and ghosts, and, you know, all everything you can imagine, which you know, highly captivated somebody like me. You know, I couldn't wait till Coast to Coast came on. I thought, well, okay, I'm already doing the hosted horror show. What about adding an interview segment to where I can do stuff like that? And that's what I did. And we talked about like the ghost hunting, or I've had people from Night of the Living Dead on the show.
Wow.
People who've been on the movies, and just, you know, professional wrestlers, and just anything that kind of tweaks my interest, you get to see.
Is there a guest you haven't had on yet that you're hoping to have on the show sometime down the road?
That's a good question. I mean, I tell you, one I would have loved to have had is George Romero, and unfortunately that can't be it. But
are you amazed? Because I don't know if a lot of people know this. The number of people who've come out of Pittsburgh that are doing some really cool things in Hollywood right now.
Yeah. You know, Tom Savini, of course, has always been in the movie making business, and Russ Striner, the guy who played Johnny off of Night of the Living Dead, he heads up a lot of that. He's responsible for helping to get a lot of that production done in Pittsburgh. So, you know, these guys are really, you know, pioneers for
Greg Nicotero.
Greg Nicotero, there's a really good example.
He's doing a few small things right now.
Yeah, he has some
nothing major.
little show on the side there he works on. But yeah, it's amazing. A lot of talent comes out of Pittsburgh, a lot of it. So, but the guest, like my fantasy guest, I guess, I mean, would be somebody like, well, Greg Nicotero would be somebody I would love to have on the show. Another would be Elvira. Yeah, I would just love I think she'd be so fun. You know, she's just got a great sense of humor, and she's been doing the horror hosting forever, you know, since the early 80s at least. So I think she'd be someone fun to talk to.
Where do you see things going from here with Chiller Night Theater, Chiller Chat? You've done a lot in 10 years, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger for you.
Well, I just recently have submitted the show for syndication, so I would like to see the show expand, you know, and,
Very nice.
and just branch out with the help of Lightning Strike Productions, and you know.
That's a nice plug, Brian. You
Yeah.
don't have to do that.
But that is, you know, is pretty cool because, like, you know, people in Maine or Massachusetts or Vermont or New Jersey, wherever, are going to be watching the show, not just on YouTube or something, although that's kind of neat too, but to actually have that as their TV lineup on hopefully Saturday night, if the station chooses to put it on there. The show plays in Pittsburgh as well on their local channel, PCTV 21. I would just love to see it just branch out and get recognition, and I'd love to see Jack Shadow become a you know, part of everybody's Saturday night little adventure. You know.
If people have questions, they want to get a hold of you, they have a question for Jack, they want to recommend a movie, what's the best way to reach you?
Facebook's a great way. You can either go to my page, Bryan Hogue, or Chiller Night Theater. How about that? I got my own page for Facebook. Wow. But you can also go to Chiller Night Theater at outlook.com and email me, and I'll be happy to answer your question. And if you recommend a movie, I'll try my best to play it. I've done that in the past. I've had viewers recommend movies, and I've played them if I can. At this time, I'm playing, you know, a public domain movie, so I got to be careful that I'm not violating any copyright laws there.
What would young Bryan Hogue say if he could see Jack Shadow?
Wow, I don't know. I don't know what would. I think he would just say, "Wow, that's cool. That is awesome." Yeah, because, like I said, the idea of Chiller Night Theater was something that I didn't want to just give to the viewers. I wanted to watch it. Like, that's something I want to watch, and young Bryan Hogue would absolutely love to watch that, especially seeing a monstrous host like that. Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Bryan, this has been a lot of fun. I am a huge fan of Chiller Night Theater. I have been for some time. Congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
And you get to go back to your hosting duties on this show. So thanks for having me join you for Chiller Chat.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, and thank you for joining us for Chiller Chat.
Have a good night.
How many times do I have to tell you, just because something isn't good doesn't mean it's bad?